Commodus was no stranger to the spotlight. As a young emperor, he craved the admiration of the Roman people, and he would stop at nothing to secure it. But what if I told you that one of the most famous stories about him, his supposed battles in the gladiatorial arena, isn't quite as it seems? We've all heard the legend, Commodus, Emperor of Rome, fighting gladiators in the Grand Coliseum. Nice. It's a tale that paints him as a man of unmatched bravery, proving his strength in a fight to the death. But is that what really happened? Or is it just another myth that has lived on for centuries? The answer isn't as simple as you might think, and as we dig deeper, you might find yourself questioning everything you thought you knew about this infamous emperor. The truth might surprise you. Commodus was, without a doubt, a man who loved the limelight. When he ascended to the throne at a young age, he was determined to leave a lasting impression on Rome, a city that was accustomed to powerful rulers. His father, Marcus Aurelius, had been revered as one of the greatest emperors in Roman history, but Commodus wasn't interested in emulating his father's stoic wisdom. Instead, he was drawn to the spectacle, the grand shows, the public displays of power, and most of all, the gladiatorial games. So, what made people believe that Commodus fought in the arena in the first place? The answer lies in his love for performance and spectacle. Commodus wasn't just a ruler, he was a showman, and he wanted to make sure that everyone knew it. He began publicizing his so-called gladiator fights, making them a part of his public persona. Over time, the stories grew bigger, with rumors swirling that Commodus himself fought against real gladiators, sometimes even in mortal combat. But here's the catch. Many of these so-called fights were far from what they appeared. In reality, most of these battles were carefully orchestrated events designed to ensure that Commodus would always emerge victorious. The emperor would face opponents who were either unarmed or severely outmatched, with the outcome of each match already decided before the first blow was struck. Still, despite these staged encounters, the legend of Commodus as a gladiator persisted. His publicist, or rather his handlers, made sure the story spread, painting him as a hero, a warrior who stood above the ordinary. This image was carefully constructed, and it's no surprise that it became ingrained in the public consciousness. In fact, it became so widespread that even centuries later, many people still believe that Commodus actually fought real gladiators. But why did Commodus go to such lengths to create this illusion? Was he simply trying to prove his strength, or was there something more at play here? You see, the emperor's obsession with fighting wasn't just about the thrill of battle, it was a political move. By presenting himself as a gladiator, Commodus was trying to solidify his image as the ultimate ruler, someone who was both a powerful leader and a fierce fighter. In ancient Rome, the image of strength was paramount, and Commodus understood that better than anyone. But there's a darker side to this story. Commodus didn't just stage fights for entertainment. As his reign continued, his obsession with the arena began to distract him from his duties as emperor. His focus on public performances and gladiatorial games overshadowed the pressing issues of the empire. The result, a weakening of Roman authority, as the emperor became more and more disconnected from the political reality of the time. What many people don't realize is that the emperor's obsession with the arena may have been a way to mask his lack of leadership. Commodus' reign was increasingly marked by extravagance, but also by instability. He was more interested in fame than in governing, and his people, especially the Roman elite, started to take notice. In fact, some historians argue that Commodus's gladiatorial performances were nothing more than a distraction, a way for him to cover up his lack of competence in running the empire. If he could convince the people that he was a great fighter, perhaps they would overlook his political failures. But as history shows, it wasn't enough to save him, and that's where things get even more interesting. Commodus' love for the arena wasn't just about proving his strength, it was about controlling his image. It's a little known fact, but his fights were as much about manipulating public opinion as they were about personal glory. In a world where perception was everything, Commodus used these staged battles to create an image of invincibility, and in doing so, he made himself both a legend and a cautionary tale. But here's the kicker. Commodus wasn't the first Roman emperor to stage fights in the arena. In fact, he followed in the footsteps of other emperors who used gladiatorial games to connect with the people. However, what set him apart was his obsession with being seen as the gladiator himself. He wanted the public to believe that he was a larger-than-life figure, a man who could do what no one else could. But did this strategy work? It's true that for a time, Commodus was immensely popular with the public. The people of Rome loved the spectacle, and the emperor was seen as a powerful figure, someone who could hold his own in the arena. But as the years went on, the facade began to crack. Commodus' reign became increasingly chaotic, and the public's view of him started to shift. His gladiatorial games, once seen as a symbol of strength, became a sign of his decline. And here's where it gets truly fascinating. Commodus' obsession with the arena may have been one of the reasons for the eventual decline of the Roman Empire. His focus on spectacle and personal glory distracted him from the real issues facing Rome, and in the end, it contributed to the instability that marked the latter years of his reign. As we continue this story, you'll see how Commodus' obsession with the gladiatorial games wasn't just a matter of personal vanity. It had far-reaching consequences for the empire itself. And while the legend of Commodus as a gladiator might still live on in popular culture, the truth is much more complicated than we've been led to believe. believe. Stay tuned, because we're just getting started. The next part of the story will reveal even more shocking truths about this notorious emperor, and you won't want to miss it. Was Commodus just pretending to be a fighter, or did he have a genuine need to perform? This question lies at the heart of understanding one of Rome's most infamous emperors. Commodus wasn't just a ruler, he was a performer, and his reign was filled with elaborate spectacles. You might be wondering, why would a man with so much power feel the need to play the part of a gladiator? Let's rewind to the early days of Commodus' rule. After becoming emperor at just 19 years old, Commodus knew that ruling wasn't just about governance. It was about maintaining an image. He wanted the Roman people to see him as not just their leader, but as a powerful and heroic figure, a modern Hercules. Commodus was determined to craft a legacy, but the key question is, why did he choose to do this by stepping into the gladiatorial arena? For Commodus, the arena wasn't just a place for the brutal fights between slaves and prisoners. It was a stage for him to display his strength, skill, and perhaps most importantly, his control over Rome. Gladiatorial games were a tradition deeply embedded in Roman culture, but they were also a means to win favor with the people. The emperor knew that if he could entertain the masses, he could solidify his power. Commodus wasn't just a spectator, he wanted to be the star. He didn't just attend the games, he became the main attraction. Commodus fought as a gladiator himself, but as well uncovered, these fights were far from real. You see, while Commodus loved the spectacle of gladiatorial combat, the idea of facing real trained gladiators was another matter. Instead of truly risking his life in battle, he carefully orchestrated his fights. The opponents were often unarmed or poorly equipped, ensuring that the emperor would emerge victorious every time. It was all part of the show, a performance designed to feed his ego and control the narrative surrounding his reign. This theatricality wasn't unique to Commodus. In fact, many rulers throughout history have used public performances to shape their image, but Commodus took it to an extreme. He saw himself as more than an emperor. He was a hero in the making, the embodiment of Roman strength and virtue. But were these performances genuine? Were they a true reflection of his power? Or was he simply hiding behind a mask of bravado? Historical sources suggest that Commodus was more interested in spectacle than in genuine leadership. He wasn't the first emperor to rely on public displays to maintain power, but his need to be seen as a gladiator, someone who could fight and win in the arena, was excessive. It wasn't enough to rule. He had to be seen as a force of nature, someone the Roman people could admire and fear. The problem was that his obsession with these spectacles came at the expense of Rome itself. As his reign progressed, Commodus became more consumed with his public persona, which ultimately distracted him from his duties as emperor. While the people cheered, the empire was slowly unraveling. Key political and military decisions were being ignored, and Commodus' reign became synonymous with instability. There's an interesting point to consider here. While Commodus' gladiatorial performances entertained the masses, they also served a deeper, more subtle purpose: control. He understood that power wasn't just about ruling, it was about how people saw you. The Roman emperors before him had understood the importance of public perception, but Commodus took it to the next level. His image wasn't just built on his imperial power, it was built on his ability to entertain and dominate the arena. In fact, some of his performances were so staged that they almost bordered on absurd. Imagine this: an emperor dressed in gladiatorial armor, facing off against opponents who were more like puppets than real adversaries. It was all about the narrative Commodus wanted to sell. His portrayal of himself as a gladiator wasn't about proving his strength, it was about creating a story that the people could buy into. But the question remains, did this work? Did Commodus's obsession with being a gladiator help him maintain power, or did it contribute to his downfall? The answer isn't simple. On one hand, Commodus's gladiatorial games did win him the favor of the masses, who loved the drama and spectacle. They saw their emperor as a heroic figure, someone who could defeat enemies in the arena just as easily as he could defeat political rivals. However, this facade didn't fool everyone. The elite, the senators, the military leaders saw Commodus for what he was, a man more interested in performance than in governing. As we continue through this story, we'll uncover how Commodus's obsession with his gladiatorial persona not only shaped his public image, but also contributed to the destabilization of the empire. By the time his reign ended, his obsession with grandeur and self-image had left Rome in turmoil. And as you'll see, the tension between his theatrical performances and his political failings ultimately led to his tragic downfall. Commodus' story is fascinating, not just because of the gladiatorial games, but because it reveals so much about the intersection of power, perception, and performance. His need for validation, his drive to prove himself in the most public way possible, wasn't just a symptom of his character, it was a symptom of his time. Rulers often relied on spectacle to maintain their image, but Commodus' story shows us the danger of letting that image define you. Did Commodus ever truly fight a real gladiator? We've all heard the stories, the legend that the Emperor of Rome, Commodus, stepped into the arena and battled gladiators. But was it really the spectacle people imagined, or was there more to the story than meets the eye? Commodus, unlike many emperors before him, wasn't content with the usual pomp and ceremony of his position. He was young, charismatic, and eager to prove his strength. At least, that's how he wanted to be perceived. So, what better way to show his power than by entering the arena, where the blood, the danger, and the drama were guaranteed to make him the center of attention? But here's the twist: these fights weren't exactly what you think think they were. The story of Commodus as a gladiator has been exaggerated and manipulated over time. Let's break it down. While most people believe Commodus actually fought real gladiators in life or death matches, the truth is far more controlled and calculated. Commodus didn't step into the arena to face trained fighters in full combat. Instead, the emperor's battles were arranged, staged affairs, carefully crafted for the public's enjoyment and his own ego. His opponents were often unarmed or poorly trained, hardly a challenge for an emperor who sought to appear invincible. He might have wielded a sword, but the real question is, did he ever face a true test of his abilities? It's widely accepted among historians that Commodus never fought to the death in the Coliseum. He might have participated in staged battles, but these were more about controlling the narrative and enhancing his public persona than proving his prowess in the arena. He was, after all, the emperor. His job was to maintain power, not to risk his life in deadly combat. And yet, the story of him as a brave gladiator who fought his way through dozens of fierce competitors was widely spread by his publicists. This wasn't just a performance, it was propaganda, designed to elevate Commodus in the eyes of the Roman people. The staged fights had a purpose. They helped cement his image as a mighty ruler. The public adored him, cheering for the emperor who appeared fearless, dominating the arena in a display of strength and courage. But the reality was that these battles were carefully orchestrated, with Commodus always winning, always victorious. Was this really about combat, or was it about control? The emperor's obsession with gladiatorial games wasn't just about putting on a show. It was deeply political. Commodus understood that in the Roman world, spectacle was a powerful tool. It wasn't enough for him to rule as a traditional emperor. He needed to be seen as a hero, a figure larger than life. By fighting in the arena, he transformed himself into a mythic figure, blending the legend of Hercules with his own image. His reign wasn't just about politics. It was about creating a persona that people would revere, one that combined might and spectacle in a way that no emperor had done before. But there's a darker side to this. As Commodus spent more time focused on his gladiatorial performances, Rome's real issues were ignored. The empire was crumbling under the weight of political instability and economic strife. But instead of dealing with these problems, Commodus was more concerned with maintaining his image. Was he a ruler, or was he merely a performer on a stage? It's a question that grows more pressing as we uncover the true consequences of his actions. The more we dig into Commodus's reign, the clearer it becomes. His public spectacles were a smokescreen. They were distractions, designed to keep the public entertained while Rome faced critical challenges. Commodus used his fights to manipulate his image, distracting the people from the empire's real problems. His public performances became the focus of his rule, and as he poured more energy into his gladiator persona, he neglected the very empire he was supposed to protect. But here's the big question. Did these staged fights work? Did they secure Commodus the loyalty of the people and keep the empire strong? The short answer is no. While the public might have cheered, the nobility and the military saw Commodus for what he truly was, someone who preferred to entertain rather than lead. His obsession with his own image alienated those who had the real power in Rome. It's hard to be an effective leader when your focus is on performance rather than governance. The real cost of these staged battles became clear as Commodus' reign progressed. His addiction to spectacle and his obsession with being seen as a gladiator slowly eroded his power. He may have been adored by the masses, but his actions led to growing unrest among the political elite. The nobility, the very people who could influence Rome's future, were increasingly frustrated with his rule. They saw his gladiatorial games as a symptom of a deeper problem, a leader who cared more about his personal glory than the future of the empire. The strange part is that even with all the signs of his failures, Commodus' image as a gladiator persisted. His reign ended in tragedy, with a conspiracy that led to his assassination. His obsession with his gladiatorial persona didn't save him from the growing discontent within Rome. In fact, it likely sealed his fate. His self-crafted myth of invincibility was shattered when he met a much darker reality: betrayal and assassination. So did Commodus ever truly fight a real gladiator? No, not in the way most people think. His fights were nothing more than carefully planned performances, and the outcome was never in doubt. He didn't risk his life in the arena, he risked his empire. And in the end, his focus on image over substance led to his downfall. The true lesson from Commodus' life is this: the power of spectacle is real, but it's fleeting. It can fool the masses, but it can't mask a weak foundation. In his quest to build an immortal image, he lost everything. And that's the truth behind the myth of Commodus, the gladiator. In a world where the emperor was seen as not only a leader, but as a symbol of Rome itself, the perception of the ruler could make or break an empire. Let's take a closer look at how Commodus used the public perception to maintain power. Commodus became emperor at a young age, and he quickly realized that ruling wasn't just about making decisions behind the scenes. The image of an emperor in ancient Rome was everything. In a city where the masses were crucial to a leader's power, shaping how the public saw you could determine your survival. For Commodus, that meant doing more than just ruling with authority. It meant crafting a persona that would captivate the Roman people. Commodus wasn't content to just sit on the throne and make decrees from behind closed doors. Instead, he wanted to be seen as a living legend, a man who embodied the strength and greatness of the Roman Empire. And how did he do that? By engaging in the very spectacle that had captured the imagination of Rome, the gladiatorial games. Commodus wasn't just a spectator at these events. He wanted to be a participant, to fight in the arena himself, even though his battles were far from the deadly contests fought by actual gladiators. Now let's dig into how Commodus used these public performances to build his image. By stepping into the arena and fighting, he didn't just become an emperor, he became a hero. The people loved their gladiators, admired them for their strength, and revered them for their courage. Commodus understood this connection between the people and their champions. If he could prove that he too was a gladiator, he would ensure that the people saw him as not just a ruler, but as a man of power, strength, and invincibility. But here's the catch. Commodus' gladiatorial fights weren't like the fights you might imagine. They weren't real. His battles were staged, carefully arranged with opponents who were either unarmed or completely outmatched. These performances were more about image than combat. The outcome of every fight was controlled, ensuring Commodus' victory every time. So, while the public cheered for their emperor, they weren't seeing a true gladiator. They were seeing a performance that was meant to solidify Commodus' image as a powerful, untouchable leader. Here's something you might not know. The Roman people believed that their emperors had to be more than just political leaders. They had to be symbolic figures, representations of the empire itself. If an emperor's image was tarnished or diminished in any way, it could lead to public unrest or even rebellion. Commodus understood this better than anyone, so his obsession with being seen as a gladiator wasn't just about personal vanity. It was a strategic move to secure his power. In fact, Commodus went to great lengths to control how he was perceived. He called himself Hercules and performed as a gladiator in a way that would befit the Roman god of strength. The imagery was powerful. The emperor fighting in the arena, victorious overall. It wasn't just about the arena, it was about the Roman people believing that Commodus was invincible. But the question we have to ask is, did it work? Did this carefully constructed image actually help him maintain power, or did it have unintended consequences? As we dig deeper, we see that Commodus' obsession with spectacle might have worked in the short term, but in the long term, it caused problems. While the people loved the shows and cheered for their emperor, the Roman elite, those who held real political power, were beginning to grow disillusioned. For them, Commodus' behavior in the arena was a sign of weakness, not strength. An emperor who would rather fight in staged battles than govern effectively was not a strong leader. In fact, his gladiatorial obsession started to undermine the very authority he sought to project. There's a strange fact here that might surprise you. Commodus' reign was full of extravagance, yet it also marked the beginning of Rome's slow decline. The more Commodus focused on his public image, the more he neglected his duties as a ruler. He wasn't leading the empire as effectively as his predecessors had, and this created instability. The elite became frustrated with him, and the cracks in his leadership began to show. While the people may have adored him, the powerful figures in Roman society saw through the facade. But here's the real kicker. Commodus wasn't the first emperor to use public displays of power to solidify his image. What set him apart was his relentless pursuit of the gladiatorial image. Other emperors had hosted games or participated in spectacles, but none went as far as Commodus did. The myth he created for himself, this larger-than-life persona of a gladiator emperor, wasn't just for fun. It was a tool for control. Commodus might have thought he could fool the people forever, but it turns out that no amount of staged victories could replace real leadership. His obsession with spectacle, rather than substance, eventually led to his downfall. It became clear that while he might have been able to manipulate public opinion, he could not manipulate the needs of an empire. He may have won the crowd's applause, but he lost the loyalty of the Senate, the military, and the people who truly mattered for the survival of the Roman state. So did Commodus' staged gladiator fights really work? They worked for a while. He entertained the masses and created a powerful image of himself as an invincible emperor. But over time, his obsession with this image became his greatest weakness. As we continue to explore the impact of Commodus' reign, you'll see how his desire to appear invincible ultimately contributed to the unraveling of his empire. Commodus' reign was one marked by extravagant spectacle and deep instability. The emperor's desire to live in the spotlight, constantly surrounded by displays of power, led him to prioritize image over governance. But what effect did this obsession with performance have on his leadership? It's no secret that Commodus craved attention. From a young age, he was thrust into the public eye, becoming emperor before many could even consider him ready for the job. And while emperors before him had been statesmen, philosophers, and generals, Commodus saw himself as something different. He wasn't content with simply ruling. He wanted to be adored, idolized, and remembered as a hero. His desire for fame took shape in a way that would ultimately change Rome forever. The public image of an emperor was crucial for maintaining power, but Commodus understood that in ancient Rome, image alone could sustain a ruler. The emperor was not just a political figure. They were a symbol of the empire itself. The people needed to see their ruler as a strong, capable force, someone who could lead them to greatness. For Commodus, being the figurehead of Rome wasn't enough. He wanted to live as an immortal legend, much like the gods of Rome's ancient past. And how better to do that than by entering the arena and fighting gladiators? This was not just about ruling. It was about becoming part of the very mythology of Rome. But there's a dark twist here. Commodus wasn't just participating in gladiatorial contests for sport. He was trying to use them as a tool for political control. By fighting in public spectacles, he was reinforcing his image as a powerful leader who could endure the same trials as his people. But these weren't real contests. They were carefully staged events meant to enhance his public persona. The truth is, Commodus never truly fought to the death with trained gladiators. The fights were rigged, carefully choreographed to ensure he was always victorious. The question is, why did Commodus go to such great lengths to craft this image? Guys, what was it about public perception that made him willing to risk the actual responsibilities of leadership? Commodus used his gladiatorial performances not just as entertainment, but as a form of political propaganda. He wanted the Roman people to believe that he was more than just a ruler. He was a gladiator, a hero. But the real question is whether this strategy actually helped him lead. Did his obsession with spectacle distract him from the serious duties of governance? The reality is that while the people cheered for Commodus, the Roman elite, including the Senate and the military, saw things very differently. They weren't impressed by his gladiatorial performances. They were concerned about his governance. As Commodus became more obsessed with his public image, he neglected the political affairs that were crucial for Rome's stability. This disconnect between the image he projected and the reality of his leadership created a dangerous instability. Roman writers often criticized Commodus for his lack of attention to the empire's affairs. His obsession with gladiatorial games wasn't just a distraction. It was a way for him to mask his weaknesses. He wasn't able to meet the demands of leadership, so he retreated into the fantasy of being a living legend. Commodus' public persona as a hero in the arena became a way to cover up his failures as a ruler. While he may have been adored by the public, those in positions of power saw him as a weak and ineffective leader. In fact, it could be argued that Commodus' reign represents the dangers of relying too heavily on public perception. His obsession with performance, his desire to maintain his image as the ultimate gladiator, ultimately undermined his ability to govern effectively. His focus on the spectacle of the arena led to the neglect of Rome's real problems, including economic instability, political unrest, and threats from rival factions within the empire. While the people may have cheered him on, his behavior alienated those who mattered most: the ruling class, the military, and the elite. The very thing that Commodus thought would solidify his power, the gladiatorial games, was in fact contributing to his downfall. His behavior in the arena didn't just distract him from political duties, it sent a message to the nobility that he wasn't fit to lead. His obsession with image, performance, and spectacle became a liability. Commodus wasn't just an emperor who fought in the arena, he was an emperor who let the arena define him, while his empire crumbled beneath the weight of his vanity. In the end, Commodus' reign ended in violence, with his eventual assassination by those closest to him. His obsession with gladiatorial combat, rather than making him stronger, made him more vulnerable. It was his detachment from real governance, his refusal to face the empire's challenges, that led to his tragic end. The spectacle he had crafted for himself as a gladiator emperor ultimately became the symbol of his failure as a ruler. So, what can we learn from this? Commodus' story is a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing public perception over actual leadership. It shows us that while spectacle can capture attention, it cannot substitute for the hard work and responsibility required to lead effectively. Commodus may have been a hero in the arena, but he was a failure as an emperor. His focus on image, performance, and entertainment took precedence over the real issues that faced Rome, and this led to his downfall. In today's world, we still see leaders who prioritize their image over their responsibilities. Commodus' story reminds us that true leadership is about more than just appearances. It's about making the tough decisions, addressing the challenges that arise, and being accountable to those you lead. When spectacle takes precedence over substance, it's only a matter of time before the cracks start to show. Commodus was not just an emperor, he was a showman, and his reign was anything but conventional. His obsession with the arena wasn't about military conquest or the stability of Rome. It was about spectacle, the kind that would ensure he remained in the public eye. Commodus craved adoration, and gladiatorial combat was his stage. Now, the idea of an emperor fighting in the arena is hard to ignore. After all, it sounds like the perfect plot for a dramatic tale, but Commodus' gladiatorial career wasn't as heroic as it may seem. While he certainly participated in these games, what most people don't realize is that the fights were largely staged. Commodus never actually fought to the death with trained warriors. His opponents were often no match for him, carefully selected to ensure his victory. But why would an emperor, especially one with so much power, need to resort to such theatrical stunts? Commodus' obsession with this public image can be traced back to his relationship with his father, Marcus Aurelius. His father, revered as one of Rome's greatest emperors, was known for his wisdom and stoic leadership. Commodus, on the other hand, was far more interested in personal glory than the well-being of the empire. The contrast between these two rulers is striking. While Marcus Aurelius spent his life dealing with political and military crises, Commodus seemed more interested in his personal reputation as a hero, even if it meant distorting the truth. His gladiatorial performances were less about fighting for Rome and more about creating a lasting image of strength and invincibility. This wasn't about the real gladiatorial tradition where men fought for survival in the arena. No, for Commodus, it was about crafting an image of a man who could not only rule but also fight alongside his people. But there's a problem here. The very thing he thought would bolster his authority, his image, was actually undermining his rule. Public perception was everything. In ancient Rome, how an emperor was viewed by the people could determine their success or failure. Commodus knew knew this. He knew that as long as the public saw him as invincible, they would follow him. While the masses cheered him on in the arena, the reality was far less glamorous. Roman writers and historians didn't share the same enthusiasm. Commodus for neglecting the empire's political and military needs, focusing more on self-promotion than governance. To understand this dynamic fully, let's break down the Roman political system. Unlike modern monarchies or presidents, Roman emperors were often seen as more than just leaders. They were symbols of the empire. They needed to embody strength and virtue. Commodus, however, misunderstood this balance. His need for validation through gladiatorial combat distracted him from addressing the empire's challenges. What makes this even more fascinating is the question of whether Commodus even recognized the harm he was doing to his empire. He was too absorbed in his persona as a gladiator to notice the cracks forming in the Roman political structure. And those cracks eventually led to instability. As the empire's political elite began to see Commodus's reign as more about spectacle than governance, they lost faith in his ability to lead effectively. But here's the strange part. Despite all his flaws, Commodus was adored by the people. His gladiatorial performances were not only grand spectacles, they were performances of power, designed to create a direct connection between the emperor and the citizens. In some ways, his public persona became a tool of control. Commodus needed the people to see him as strong and untouchable, and these staged fights were his way of ensuring their loyalty. The truth is, the public's affection for him wasn't enough to protect him from the forces of power that he had alienated. His obsession with image led him to neglect the empire's real political problems, and this ultimately led to his demise. It was his failure to address the real issues of leadership that made him so vulnerable. Eventually, this illusion of invincibility crumbled, and Commodus was assassinated by those closest to him, his own inner circle, who saw him as more of a liability than a leader. What can we learn from Commodus? His story serves as a powerful reminder of the dangers of living in the shadow of your image. Commodus' reign was defined not by the strength of his leadership, but by his obsession with how he was perceived. This misguided focus led to today. The story of Commodus remains a cautionary tale. Image and spectacle can only take you so far. True leadership is about substance, not just performance. If we look closely at Commodus' life, we can see a parallel with the way some modern leaders craft their public personas. Whether in politics or business, the temptation to prioritize public image over effective leadership can be powerful. But just like Commodus, the public's affection can be fleeting. In the end, only true leadership, rooted in responsibility and action, can sustain long-term power. So, the next time you hear the legend of Commodus fighting gladiators in the arena, remember this: the truth is far more complex, and his legacy is not one of strength but of the dangerous consequences of focusing too much on the illusion. Commodus, the infamous Roman emperor, is remembered by many as a gladiator who fought in the arena. It's a compelling image, an emperor dressed in armor, facing down his enemies in front of a cheering crowd. But was this image of Commodus really true? Was he truly a gladiator, risking his life in the blood-stained sand? Or was he simply playing a role? Most people think of him as the ultimate showman, a warrior who sought fame through battle. But the reality behind his arena appearances might shock you. The truth is much more complicated. What made people believe that Commodus fought in the arena in the first place? For one, Commodus became emperor at a young age. He was eager to prove himself and loved the spotlight. His reign was marked by public displays, often exaggerated, to ensure he remained at the center of attention. He began promoting these staged fights, which led many to believe he was a real gladiator. Over time, stories spread, claiming that Commodus faced off against real gladiators. But did he really fight to the death, or was it all part of his theatrical image? The legend of Commodus fighting gladiators is largely based on the idea that he was not just a ruler, but a performer. Commodus craved recognition, and he sought it through grand spectacles. His gladiatorial battles were a way to convince the people of Rome that their emperor was not only their leader, but a powerful fighter, unafraid of facing death. Many of these fights were staged, and the outcome was carefully controlled. Commodus' opponents were often untrained, no match for him, and his victories were never in doubt. Why would an emperor, someone with absolute power, feel the need to stage such fights? The answer lies in the need for public perception. Roman emperors were not just rulers, they were symbols of Roman strength and virtue. To maintain power, emperors needed to keep the people's support. Commodus understood that public opinion was everything. By fighting in the arena, he ensured that the people would see him as a mighty figure, someone who could protect Rome, not just from external enemies, but from any threat, including internal doubts. He wanted the people to believe he was more than just a ruler. He wanted them to think of him as a gladiator too. Yet the reality was different. Commodus was more interested in the spectacle than actual governance. While he basked in the glory of these public performances, the real issues facing Rome, such as political instability, economic struggles, and military challenges, were ignored. Commodus' reign was filled with extravagant shows, but behind the scenes, things were unraveling. His behavior, though popular with the masses, was increasingly seen as irresponsible and self-serving by the Roman elite. Historians from his time criticized him for neglecting his duties as a leader. He was more focused on creating a personal legacy than securing the future of the empire. This focus on spectacle rather than substance brings us to the relationship between Commodus and his father, Marcus Aurelius. Marcus Aurelius is often remembered as one of Rome's greatest emperors. Why? wise, stoic, and deeply committed to the welfare of the empire. His leadership was grounded in philosophy and the pursuit of virtue. In stark contrast, Commodus' reign was marked by indulgence, hedonism, and a focus on self-glorification. The comparison between father and son is striking. While Marcus Aurelius dedicated his life to serving Rome, Commodus seemed more concerned with building his own image. Was he trying to live up to his father's legacy, or was he rebelling against it? The conflict between Marcus Aurelius and Commodus offers important insight into the decisions Commodus made. While Marcus Aurelius was preoccupied with Rome's future, Commodus focused on his own fame, and this contrast became even clearer when Commodus began his gladiatorial performances. These public spectacles were not just for entertainment, they were political tools, carefully crafted to reinforce his image as a hero. But these performances were not without consequences. Commodus' gladiatorial appearances were damaging to Rome's image. While the public cheered for him in the arena, the Roman elite disapproved of his actions. The emperor's focus on spectacle, rather than statecraft, was seen as a betrayal of Rome's traditional values. In a society where leadership was meant to be serious and virtuous, Commodus' behavior undermined the empire's reputation. His actions suggested that Rome had become a place where the emperor sought attention for personal glory, rather than leading with wisdom and strength. But despite the elite's disapproval, Commodus continued to use the arena as a stage for his performances. The question remains, could this obsession with public shows have been a reason for Rome's eventual decline? Could the emperor's need to entertain the masses have distracted him from the true issues of leadership? It's a complex question, and it's one that reveals the deeper dangers of prioritizing image over substance. In ancient Rome, spectacle was not just entertainment, it was a powerful tool for maintaining control. Roman emperors like Commodus knew that public perception was crucial to their rule. By hosting grand gladiatorial games, he ensured his popularity with the people. These spectacles became distractions, diverting attention away from the empire's struggles. In a way, Commodus's gladiatorial appearances were a form of political theater, where the emperor played the role of the heroic fighter. But as entertaining as these shows were, they failed to address the empire's real problems, and Commodus' reign would eventually suffer for it. Commodus' actions, particularly his obsession with the arena, put his leadership in jeopardy. His focus on self-glorification led to a breakdown in his ability to lead effectively. As the emperor became more involved in his performances, he distanced himself from the political and military issues that were threatening the empire. His reign became unstable, and tensions within the Roman elite grew. Some argue that Commodus' gladiator persona weakened the empire's structure, while others suggest that his leadership style itself was the primary problem. Either way, the damage was done. The fall of the Antonine dynasty, which had been one of Rome's strongest ruling families, can be traced back to Commodus' reign. His reckless behavior and focus on personal glory tarnished the family's legacy. After his death, the empire was thrown into chaos, and the stability that had once defined the Antonine family came to an end. Was Commodus' reign the beginning of Rome's slow decline? Could his actions have set in motion the forces that eventually led to the empire's fall? The answers to these questions are still debated by historians, but one thing is clear: Commodus' reign marked a turning point in Rome's history. Why did Commodus, the emperor of Rome, want the people to believe he fought gladiators in the arena? Was it for power, fame, or something darker? You've probably heard the stories about him, where the emperor himself took to the arena, slaying gladiators and performing like a warrior. But what if I told you that much of what you know about Commodus as a gladiator is simply a myth, a constructed image designed to maintain power? Let's uncover the truth together. Commodus became emperor at a remarkably young age. He was thrust into leadership while still in his 20s, and he quickly realized the importance of the public's perception. The image of a strong, invincible emperor was critical for maintaining control over the empire. But was it enough for Commodus to simply rule from the palace? Absolutely not. He craved more. He wanted to be seen as an invincible warrior, a hero, someone whose strength rivaled the greatest Roman warriors. To achieve this, Commodus began to appear in gladiatorial games, not as a spectator, but as a participant. This might sound shocking, but the reality is more complex than simply putting on a show of strength. These fights were carefully curated performances designed to craft an image. He staged numerous fights, where he was often pitted against opponents who were either unarmed, weak, or simply not gladiators. In other words, these were not real life-and-death combat situations. But why was this necessary? Most people think that fighting in the arena was about proving strength or bravery, but the reality is that Commodus wasn't really proving anything. He was constructing a narrative. Commodus wanted the people of Rome to see him as a gladiator, a protector, a man who could handle anything thrown his way. His staged battles were designed not to be dangerous, but to build an image. The outcome of these contests was preordained, and as far as the people knew, Commodus was invincible. But why, you might wonder, would an emperor go so far to promote himself as a gladiator? The answer lies in his obsession with spectacle. In ancient Rome, emperors didn't just rule, they performed. They were part of a political theater where their image was often more important than their actual actions. And for Commodus, these stage battles were nothing more than an extension of his need for control over public perception. They cheered him on, seeing him as their heroic emperor, their gladiator king. Yet, as much as this image fed his ego, it also started to create tension. Commodus was increasingly seen as someone more interested interested in putting on a show than ruling with the gravitas expected of a Roman emperor. What was being sacrificed in this obsession with spectacle? Real leadership. There's a shocking fact about Roman politics you may not know. While the emperor's role in the arena was to entertain and inspire, they were never supposed to actually fight. Gladiators were trained professionals who fought for honor and survival, not to please the emperor. The emperor's role was largely ceremonial, representing the might of Rome, but Commodus blurred this line. He not only wanted to be seen as a ruler, but he craved the direct adoration that came with being a gladiator in the public's eyes. He wanted to be both ruler and hero, blurring the lines between political leadership and personal glory. But as he staged these dramatic spectacles, what was the cost to Rome? The public loved it, but the nobility saw it differently. They viewed his actions as a betrayal of Rome's traditions. A real emperor, in their eyes, would lead with wisdom and strategy, not with a sword in hand. Commodus' obsession with the arena undermined the empire's image as a strong and stable institution. Rather than leading with intelligence, he led with performance, and this shift in priorities could have played a role in Rome's slow decline. To further understand how this obsession with spectacle affected Rome's image, it's important to look at how the emperors before Commodus relied on public opinion. The Roman emperor had to maintain control of public perception, but the methods of doing so evolved. Commodus turned gladiatorial combat into his personal stage. It was more than just a game for him. It was a tool of power. By presenting himself as the strongest, most daring emperor, he captured the loyalty of the masses. But this also meant distracting the people from the real issues plaguing the empire. Public spectacle, not real governance, became the order of the day. One of the most powerful things about public displays in ancient Rome was their ability to control the narrative. The people saw what the emperor wanted them to see, and Commodus understood this better than anyone. By hosting lavish gladiatorial games, he cemented his popularity. But just like any modern-day politician who stages an event for public consumption, Commodus' spectacles were distractions. They allowed him to maintain a firm grip on the empire, even though the empire itself was slowly being left behind in terms of real political and military strategy. The questions that arise are critical. Was Commodus a hero or just a performer? Did his leadership reflect the power of Rome, or was it a shallow imitation? The importance of these spectacles in maintaining power brings us back to the question, why did Commodus rely so heavily on these grand displays? To answer that, we need to understand the true purpose of spectacle in Roman politics. Emperors like Commodus didn't just rule, they performed. Public spectacles were the centerpiece of Roman political life. By putting on these games, Commodus ensured his popularity and distracted the masses from the instability growing underneath his reign. These shows were not about actual combat, they were about performance, about creating a spectacle that cemented his image. So what does this mean for the future of Rome? Well, there's a curious paradox here. While Commodus succeeded in winning the adoration of the masses, his reign left the empire weaker, not stronger. His performances, which were meant to elevate him as a gladiator and a hero, ultimately distracted him from the pressing issues of the empire. His obsession with image overshadowed his responsibility as a ruler. Could these spectacles in fact have been the beginning of Rome's slow and painful decline? By relying so heavily on public performances, Commodus alienated the Roman elite. His focus was on personal glory, not on securing Rome's future. While the people cheered for him, the political structure that supported the emperor began to fracture. The power of the emperor, once a stabilizing force, became a source of division and instability. Could Commodus' actions have contributed to the eventual decline of Rome? History seems to suggest that his obsession with spectacle may have been one of the catalysts for the empire's downfall. Commodus may be most famous for his legendary battles in the arena, but how much of it is true? Most people think he truly fought brutal gladiators to prove his strength. The reality, far more complex. This wasn't just a gladiator's fight, it was a carefully crafted image. The emperor wasn't just trying to entertain, he was trying to manipulate public perception. But how far did he go? Commodus inherited the throne at a young age. Having become emperor in his late teens, he was thrust into a world of political pressure and expectations. Like many rulers, he understood the power of public opinion, how the masses could build or tear down a ruler's reign. But instead of leading with wisdom, he chose to lead with spectacle. His performances in the gladiatorial arena were, in essence, part of this spectacle. Commodus wanted to be seen as a true warrior, an emperor who was both a ruler and a hero, a modern-day Hercules. But here's the twist. Most of the battles he fought were staged. Yes, you heard that right. Commodus didn't fight to the death in the arena as legend often portrays. Instead, he took part in carefully arranged fights where the outcomes were fixed, with opponents who posed little to no threat. Why did he do this? To make the people believe in his strength, to solidify his status as not just an emperor, but a gladiator. Commodus craved the adoration of the masses, and what better way to secure that than by performing in the gladiator arena? Public displays, like gladiatorial combat, were an ancient form of political theater in Rome. An emperor who could win in the arena would be loved by the people. Commodus wasn't just seeking victory, he was seeking an image of invincibility, and in the process, he used these stage spectacles to distract the Roman people from the deeper issues plaguing his reign. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. While the public cheered, the elites of Rome were not impressed. Roman senators, military leaders, and other figures of power saw through Commodus' grand performances. They understood that a real emperor wouldn't waste their time fighting fighting in the arena for applause. By focusing so much on spectacle, Commodus neglected the real duties of a leader. His decision to stage these gladiatorial fights didn't just weaken his political standing, it undermined the very stability of the empire. The truth about Commodus's gladiatorial obsession is less about his personal courage and more about his desperation to maintain power. Public opinion in ancient Rome was everything. Emperors like Commodus realized that if you controlled the narrative, you controlled the empire. And by appearing as a gladiator, Commodus wasn't just fighting for his life in the arena, he was fighting for his legacy. It's important to understand the role of spectacle in Roman politics. Emperors used public displays to maintain control, and Commodus was no different. The grandeur of gladiatorial games was meant to show the emperor's power and dominance. By participating in these games, Commodus ensured his popularity with the people, but his political acumen was questioned by the elite. It's the same reason why leaders today sometimes rely on grand gestures and media events to distract from real issues. Commodus wasn't just putting on fights, he was putting on a show. However, the question remains, was Commodus' reliance on spectacle more damaging than beneficial to the Roman Empire? Could these grand performances be the start of the empire's decline? When the emperor's focus shifts from governance to grandstanding, it creates cracks in the foundation of the state. This overemphasis on the emperor as a spectacle rather than a leader eventually led to political instability. Commodus may have secured the cheers of the masses, but the nobility and military, the true backbone of Roman power, began to turn against him. It's crucial to grasp the political implications of this spectacle. Commodus' performances in the arena were about more than just keeping the people entertained. They were about controlling the narrative, about keeping the Roman citizens on his side. The emperor who could win a gladiatorial contest was seen as a godlike figure, someone who could protect the empire with his strength, but by diverting his focus away from actual governance, Commodus put the entire empire at risk. When the elites, the ones who controlled Rome's true power, began to disapprove of his actions, the writing was on the wall. The obsession with spectacle may have started out as a tool for maintaining power, but in the end, it created a distorted image of Commodus. No longer viewed as a serious ruler, he was seen as a performer, a man more interested in maintaining a facade of strength than in strengthening the empire. By relying so heavily on public theater, Commodus ignored the real work of governing. This not only created tension within the political elite, but also weakened the foundations of the empire itself. So what do we learn from Commodus' life and his obsession with the gladiatorial arena? It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing image over substance. Commodus may have been an emperor, but his actions as a gladiator never made him a true leader. His story highlights the importance of leadership that is grounded in wisdom, strategy, and governance, qualities that he neglected in favor of personal glory. The tragic irony of Commodus's reign is that his obsession with fighting in the arena was ultimately his undoing. His need for adoration and validation led him to alienate those closest to him. His reckless behavior sparked political turmoil, culminating in his assassination. His reign ended not with the glory of a gladiator, but with the swift betrayal of those who had once supported him. This tragic end speaks to the dangers of living in a world of illusion, where the need to maintain a public image outweighs the responsibilities of leadership. Commodus' story also offers us a valuable lesson about how power is wielded today. In our modern world, where social media can create distorted images of power, the lessons from Commodus' reign remain relevant. His life teaches us about the dangers of a leader more interested in spectacle than in substance, more interested in image than in action. It's a reminder that true leadership isn't about the applause, it's about making the hard decisions that serve the greater good. So, what's the final truth about Commodus and his gladiatorial exploits? Despite the myths, Commodus didn't fight real gladiators to the death. His fights were staged, carefully arranged for public consumption. The legend of Commodus as a gladiator is more fiction than fact, but the myth persists, shaping how we view him even today. This raises an interesting question. How does the myth of Commodus and his reliance on public spectacle change the way we think about leadership in our own time? Commodus' story remains relevant today because it reminds us of the power of image and illusion. In a world dominated by social media and constant publicity, Commodus' rise and fall offer important lessons. It's not just about the show, it's about the true substance behind the performance. The emperor who sought glory in the arena rather than true governance ultimately lost both. What can we learn from this? That leadership requires more than just spectacle. It requires the integrity and wisdom to act for the greater good, not just to entertain. Commodus, the Roman emperor, is often remembered for one infamous reason: his participation in gladiatorial combat. Most people think of him as a ruler who fought in the arena to prove his strength and valor. But here's the truth. The story isn't as simple as it sounds. His actions weren't about courage, but about maintaining a carefully crafted image. It's easy to imagine Commodus as a hero, battling gladiators in the Coliseum, but the reality is much different. When you dig into history, you'll discover that Commodus' fights were more about performance than genuine combat. In fact, most of his battles were staged. He never truly fought for survival. Instead, he performed in the arena for show, wanting to appear as a gladiator king in the eyes of the public. He took the throne at a young age, after the death of his father, Marcus Aurelius, one of the most respected Roman emperors. His actions in the arena, parading himself as a gladiator, were designed to cement his image as a powerful emperor. But did this image of power have any real substance? Let's explore the truth behind these performances and how they affected both the empire and his legacy. But first, what made the people believe that Commodus fought in the arena at all? Did stories circulate that he went face to face with real gladiators? Commodus, eager to prove his strength, orchestrated numerous public spectacles. These shows weren't true battles. They were staged, with Commodus playing the hero in an act designed to maintain his image as an invincible ruler. Or why would an emperor, someone who already had all the power of Rome at his disposal, go to such lengths to create an illusion of strength? Well, the answer lies in the nature of ancient Roman politics. Public opinion in Rome wasn't just important, it was essential for maintaining power. If you could win the favor of the people, your rule would be secure. Commodus understood this deeply, and he knew that fighting in the arena would make him appear stronger and more capable than any other emperor. Yet, Commodus wasn't the first to rely on spectacle. Roman emperors before him had used public games to maintain control and win favor. But what sets Commodus apart is how far he took this obsession. These games weren't just ceremonial events, they were part of his identity. His performances were designed to blur the line between emperor and gladiator. The people weren't just watching a ruler, they were watching someone they believed could fight for their lives in the arena. But here's the twist. Most of Commodus' fights were against opponents who were no match for him. He never truly faced death in the arena. These were carefully controlled matches, often against men who had no chance of defeating him. Commodus needed was the public spectacle, the appearance of danger and victory. His actual skills as a fighter, or lack thereof, weren't the point. This is where the mystery deepens. What was Commodus hiding behind these staged gladiatorial games? Why did he resort to such extreme measures to create a fabricated persona? The answer is complex. Commodus' reign was riddled with instability, and many historians believe that his obsession with public spectacles was a way to distract from the chaos in his empire. By focusing on performances in the arena, he could avoid the hard work of governing. Rather than confronting the issues facing Rome, rising tensions, military dissatisfaction, and internal strife, Commodus turned to what he knew best: performance. But did it work? Did the people buy into this show? For a time, yes. Commodus' gladiatorial exhibitions were a hit with the Roman populace. They cheered for their emperor, convinced that he was not only a ruler, but a warrior who could fight beside them. His performances won him admiration and respect. But what about the rest of the empire? Truth is, the nobility and the elite weren't impressed. The Roman elite, including the Senate and military leaders, began to see Commodus for what he was. They watched in frustration as the emperor turned to spectacle instead of serious leadership. The question now becomes, how did this obsession with gladiatorial combat affect Rome as a whole? While the people cheered, the political structure of Rome began to weaken. A ruler who focused on image rather than leadership wasn't able to maintain the empire's stability. Commodus' neglect of political affairs and overemphasis on public performance contributed to the destabilization of Roman governance. In short, his obsession with the arena distracted him from the real issues of ruling. Commodus was living in a world of illusion, and it was a dangerous one. The more he fed his need for public adoration, the more he ignored the responsibilities of governing. The Roman elites grew restless, and tensions within the political sphere reached a boiling point. The very same spectacle that secured his popularity with the masses made him vulnerable to the elite class. Commodus was a symbol of a ruler who was more concerned with appearances than with making the hard decisions necessary for Rome's survival. What we see here is a fundamental flaw in Commodus' leadership style. While people saw him as their heroic gladiator, the true strength of Rome lay in its political leadership and military strength. Commodus didn't realize that his image alone wasn't enough to sustain the empire. He was so caught up in the performance that he failed to understand the deeper needs of the empire. His focus on gladiatorial games was not just about entertaining the people, it was a distraction from the real work of governance. By the end of his reign, Commodus had alienated those closest to him. His reckless actions, which included not only his gladiatorial performances, but also his erratic behavior and mismanagement of Rome's resources, made enemies both in the Senate and within the military elite. It was the beginning of the end for Commodus. His focus on public performance, rather than effective leadership, had created a rift between him and the power structures that kept Rome stable. Eventually, Commodus' reign came to a tragic end with his assassination. His gladiatorial games, once thought to be his legacy, were no longer enough to save him. In the end, it wasn't his skill in the arena that mattered, but his ability, or inability, to lead Rome through turbulent times. His tragic end serves as a powerful reminder that leadership is about substance, not spectacle. What can we learn from Commodus' life? His reign is a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing image over substance. Commodus may have been emperor, but he was no true leader. His focus on spectacle over the real work of governance weakened the empire and ultimately led to his downfall. The lessons of his life still resonate today. In a world where appearances can easily be manipulated, true leadership requires more than just a performance. It requires action, integrity, and the wisdom to make difficult decisions. Commodus, the infamous Roman emperor, is often remembered for one outrageous act: fighting gladiators in the arena. Most people think of him as a brutal warrior who loved to prove his strength, but the truth is much stranger and even more surprising. Was he truly fighting to the death, or was it all a carefully carefully constructed spectacle, let's unravel the mystery behind one of the most controversial figures in Roman history. At the heart of the legend is the idea that Commodus fought in the Coliseum, battling real gladiators. But what if I told you that much of what you've heard is a fabrication? Commodus wasn't interested in true combat. His role in the arena was more about performance, about creating an image. His reign was more of a public relations stunt than a genuine pursuit of power. In this video, we're going to explore how Commodus used gladiatorial combat to shape his own image, and why it had far-reaching consequences for the empire. But how did this myth of Commodus as a gladiator begin? Why did so many people believe he truly fought in deadly battles? It turns out that Commodus, unlike other emperors, thrived on attention. From a young age, he loved the spotlight. When he became emperor, he wanted the people of Rome to see him as more than just a ruler. He wanted to be their hero, and nothing could solidify that image more than public displays of strength. But what exactly did these fights entail? Most people assume that Commodus fought in the Coliseum against trained gladiators. The truth is, his fights were carefully staged, often against men who were no match for him. These battles were more like theatrical performances than real combat. Commodus wanted to be seen as a powerful, invincible emperor, so he made sure that the outcome was never in doubt. But why did he go to such extreme lengths to manipulate his image? Roman emperors have always relied on public opinion to stay in power. What better way to win the loyalty of the people than by being their champion in the arena? Commodus understood this better than most. He wanted the people to see him as not just a ruler, but as a gladiator, a figure who would fight alongside them. His public appearances were designed to build a relationship with the masses. But despite his popularity with the common folk, the Roman elite were growing increasingly wary. The spectacle in the arena may have won him cheers, but it also alienated the very people he needed to secure his reign. What makes Commodus's story so fascinating and so dangerous is the way he blurred the lines between appearance and reality. He wasn't the first Roman emperor to use public displays to maintain control, but his obsession with gladiatorial combat took it to a whole new level. By constantly appearing in the arena, Commodus distracted both the people and the Senate from the empire's internal struggles. While he fought for glory in the arena, Rome was being destabilized by his mismanagement. His obsession with spectacle distracted him from the real work of governance. But did it really work? For a while, Commodus' theatrics did secure his popularity with the people. He appeared invincible, unstoppable, just like a gladiator should. But this popularity was superficial. While the masses cheered, the nobility saw Commodus for what he truly was, a ruler obsessed with appearance and image rather than leadership. The senators, the military, and the elite had no time for his staged performances. They needed a leader who could address the empire's political and military challenges, not an emperor who sought adoration through elaborate stunts. Why? Was Commodus' obsession with gladiatorial combat the beginning of the empire's decline? The truth is more complicated. While he entertained the people, Commodus' neglect of his political duties created a rift between him and the empire's power structures. His extravagant performances in the arena were a distraction. The real work of ruling was ignored, and with it the empire's stability began to erode. Commodus wasn't just a bad emperor because he loved spectacle. He became dangerous because he used that spectacle to hide his failures. The more he performed, the more Rome's actual problems went ignored. It wasn't just the gladiatorial games that made him a poor leader. It was his inability to manage Rome's vast empire. Internal strife, military problems, and political corruption were brewing. But rather than address them, Commodus focused on staying in the public eye. His reign became a show, a farce that was being performed for the people of Rome. As Commodus became more consumed by his gladiatorial persona, tensions within the empire grew. Political factions within the Senate and military began to see Commodus not as an emperor, but as a puppet. His games, his speeches, his entire public persona were distractions that kept him from dealing with the empire's real issues. Those around him became increasingly frustrated. They saw a man more interested in performing for an audience than in making decisions that would protect the empire. This was not just a personal flaw, it was a flaw in how Commodus viewed power. Power was no longer about making the hard decisions. It was about keeping the crowds cheering. The final blow came when Commodus' reckless behavior and focus on spectacle led to his assassination. His obsession with gladiatorial performances may have won him temporary favor, but it cost him his throne. In the end, it was the failure to lead, not his lack of combat skills, that led to his downfall. Commodus' death marked the end of an era and the beginning of a long period of instability for the Roman Empire. So, what can we learn from the story of Commodus? His life serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing image over substance. His desire to be seen as a hero in the eyes of the public blinded him to the real needs of the empire. Commodus may have been a man of spectacle, but true leadership requires more than just putting on a show. Power isn't about dominating the arena. It's about making difficult decisions, managing crises, and preserving the integrity of the empire. Commodus' story is still relevant today, especially in an age where image and perception often outweigh substance. His reign is a reminder of the dangers of using spectacle as a distraction from the real work of leadership. Whether in politics, business, or personal life, we must remember that what matters most is not how we are perceived, but what we do when no one is watching. The myth of Commodus as a gladiator may be far more fiction than fact, but the the lessons of his life are undeniable. We are all shaped by the image we project, but true strength comes from the substance behind that image. Commodus' life teaches us that the desire to be seen as powerful can lead to a fall from grace, especially when it comes at the expense of real leadership. Commodus, the infamous Roman emperor, is often remembered for one outrageous act: fighting gladiators in the arena. Most people think of him as a brutal warrior who loved to prove his strength, but the truth is much stranger and even more surprising. Was he truly fighting to the death, or was it all a carefully constructed spectacle? Let's unravel the mystery behind one of the most controversial figures in Roman history. At the heart of the legend is the idea that Commodus fought in the Coliseum, battling real gladiators. But what if I told you that much of what you've heard is a fabrication? Commodus wasn't interested in true combat. His role in the arena was more about performance, about creating an image. His reign was more of a public relations stunt than a genuine pursuit of power. In this video, we're going to explore how Commodus used gladiatorial combat to shape his own image and why it had far-reaching consequences for the empire. But how did this myth of Commodus as a gladiator begin? Why did so many people believe he truly fought in deadly battles? It turns out that Commodus, unlike other emperors, thrived on attention. From a young age, he loved the spotlight. When he became emperor, he wanted the people of Rome to see him as more than just a ruler. He wanted to be their hero, and nothing could solidify that image more than public displays of strength. But what exactly did these fights entail? Most people assume that Commodus fought in the Coliseum against trained gladiators. The truth is, his fights were carefully staged, often against men who were no match for him. These battles were more like theatrical performances than real combat. Commodus wanted to be seen as a powerful, invincible emperor, so he made sure that the outcome was never in doubt. But why did he go to such extreme lengths to manipulate his image? Roman emperors have always relied on public opinion to stay in power. What better way to win the loyalty of the people than by being their champion in the arena? Commodus understood this better than most. He wanted the people to see him as not just a ruler, but as a gladiator, a figure who would fight alongside them. His public appearances were designed to build a relationship with a man. But despite his popularity with the common folk, the Roman elite were growing increasingly wary. The spectacle in the arena may have won him cheers, but it also alienated the very people he needed to secure his reign. What makes Commodus' story so fascinating and so dangerous is the way he blurred the lines between appearance and reality. He wasn't the first Roman emperor to use public displays to maintain control, but his obsession with gladiatorial combat took it to a whole new level. These were not just games, these were political tools. By constantly appearing in the arena, Commodus distracted both the people and the Senate from the empire's internal struggles. While he fought for glory in the arena, Rome was being destabilized by his mismanagement. His obsession with spectacle distracted him from the real work of governance. But did it really work? For a while, Commodus' theatrics did secure his popularity with the people. He appeared invincible, unstoppable, just like a gladiator should. But this popularity was superficial. While the masses cheered, the nobility saw Commodus for what he truly was: a ruler obsessed with appearance and image rather than leadership. The senators, the military, and the elite had no time for his stage performances. They needed a leader who could address the empire's political and military challenges, not an emperor who sought adoration through elaborate stunts. What happened next? Was Commodus' obsession with gladiatorial combat the beginning of the empire's decline? The truth is more complicated. While he entertained the people, Commodus' neglect of his political duties created a rift between him and the empire's power structures. His extravagant performances in the arena were a distraction. The real work of ruling was ignored, and with it, the empire's stability began to erode. Commodus wasn't just a bad emperor because he loved spectacle. The more he performed, the more Rome's actual problems went ignored. Internal strife, military problems, and political corruption were brewing. But rather than address them, Commodus focused on staying in the public eye. His reign became a show, a farce that was being performed for the people of Rome. As Commodus became more consumed by his gladiatorial persona, tensions within the empire grew. Political factions within the Senate and military began to see Commodus not as an emperor but as a puppet. His games, his speeches, his entire public persona were distractions that kept him from dealing with the empire's real issues. Those around him became increasingly frustrated. They saw a man more interested in performing for an audience than in making decisions that would protect the empire. This was not just a personal flaw, it was a flaw in how Commodus viewed power. Power was no longer about making the hard decisions, it was about keeping the crowds cheering. The final blow came when Commodus' reckless behavior and focus on spectacle led to his assassination. His obsession with gladiatorial performances may have won him temporary favor, but it cost him his throne. Commodus' death marked the end of an era and the beginning of a long period of instability for the Roman Empire. So what can we learn from the story of Commodus? His life serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing image over substance. His desire to be seen as a hero in the eyes of the public blinded him to the real needs of the empire. Commodus may have been a man of spectacle, but true leadership requires more than just putting on a show. Power isn't about dominating the arena. It's about making difficult decisions, managing crises, and preserving the integrity of the empire. Commodus' story is still relevant today, especially in an age where image and perception often outweigh substance. His reign is a reminder of the dangers of using spectacle as a distraction from the real work of leadership. Whether in politics, business, or personal life, we must remember that what matters most is not how we are perceived, but what we do when no one is watching. The myth of Commodus as a gladiator may be far more fiction than fact, but the lessons of his life are undeniable. We are all shaped by the image we project, but true strength comes from the substance behind that image. Commodus' life teaches us that the desire to be seen as powerful can lead to a fall from grace, especially when it comes at the expense of real leadership. Commodus, the Roman emperor, is often remembered for his dramatic entrance into the Coliseum, rumored to have fought gladiators in the arena. But how much of this is true? Truth might surprise you, as the answer is far from the simple, violent legend that many believe. Today, we're diving into the complex story of Commodus, separating fact from fiction and uncovering the surprising way he shaped his legacy. You may have heard stories of Commodus battling fierce gladiators in front of roaring crowds. Most people picture him as a ruthless leader, carving out a reputation through physical prowess. But the reality is Commodus' gladiatorial exploits were much more about performance than actual combat. And by the end of this video, you'll see that the story of Commodus is more of a political maneuver than an emperor's battle for glory. So, why do we still talk about him as a gladiator today? Let's start by looking at how the myth of Commodus as a gladiator took root. How did this story gain such traction? The answer lies in Commodus' obsession with public image. From the moment he became emperor, Commodus was fascinated with the idea of proving his strength. His rise to power was swift, and he had a need to assert himself not just as a ruler, but as a man of action, one capable of handling any challenge. But there's a catch. The fights he participated in were more about his public persona than genuine gladiatorial combat. They were staged events, with opponents who were no match for him. Yet the narrative he built was so compelling that it became entrenched in Roman culture. What did this mean for his reputation, and how did it impact his rule? The reality is that Commodus wasn't the fierce gladiator the stories make him out to be. His performances in the arena were planned, orchestrated spectacles meant to cultivate an image of invincibility. It wasn't about battle, at least, not in the way you might think. He wanted to be seen as a hero, not a ruler. Public displays of strength, especially those as dramatic as gladiatorial combat, were tools he used to strengthen his image in the eyes of the people. Commodus craved adoration, and these fights gave him the perfect platform to shine in front of the masses. In ancient Rome, public perception was everything. The emperor wasn't just a political figure. They were a symbol, an embodiment of Rome's power. So, it's no surprise that Commodus used his staged battles to manipulate the way people saw him. But here's where the real story takes an interesting turn. While the general public may have been captivated by his performances, the Roman elite, those who held real power, saw Commodus in a much different light. His obsession with spectacle started to undermine the very thing that kept him in power: his image as a strong, competent ruler. His public stunts were seen by many as a distraction from the serious responsibilities he was neglecting as emperor. Commodus' reign, filled with grand gestures and spectacles, became increasingly unstable. Why was this obsession with performance so dangerous to his leadership? To understand this, we need to look at how Commodus used the arena to his advantage. The gladiatorial games, grand and brutal as they were, weren't just for entertainment. They were political tools. Commodus knew that by dominating the arena, he could secure the loyalty of the people. The spectacle of seeing their emperor face off against gladiators created an image of power and invincibility. But there's a darker side to all of this. These games weren't only about impressing the masses. They were also a way for Commodus to distract from his political shortcomings. As his gladiatorial persona took center stage, the empire's actual governance began to suffer. The question that arises is whether Commodus' obsession with performance was the root of his downfall. Was it his gladiator persona that weakened the empire, or was it his inability to lead effectively? As we look deeper into his reign, we see that Commodus neglected crucial political duties while focusing on his role as a gladiator. He was more interested in playing the part of a hero than in handling the empire's growing instability. The nobility, the military elite, those who truly shaped the empire, began to lose faith in him. Commodus' gladiatorial performances may have secured his popularity with the people, but they were a double-edged sword. The public may have cheered, but the empire's stability eroded. His focus on entertaining the masses detracted from his responsibilities as a ruler. While Commodus fought for glory in the arena, the empire slowly fell apart behind him. The more he performed, the more Rome's internal strife went unchecked. His reign was a symbol of political distraction, a ruler obsessed with the superficial at the cost of the empire's true needs. This obsession ultimately paved the way for his downfall. But was it his gladiatorial games that caused his demise, or was it the failure to address the empire's growing problems? When Commodus' reign came to an end, it was marked by chaos. His gladiatorial obsession, which had once served to elevate his image, became a symbol of his failure as a leader. His focus on public displays, rather than on the empire's governance, alienated those around him. His assassination, though politically motivated, was the tragic result of a ruler who had become a puppet of his own performance. The empire that Commodus ruled had fractured under the weight of his distractions. The question remains, what lessons can we learn from his tragic story? The life of Commodus is a cautionary tale for anyone in power. His need for spectacle over substance is a clear clear example of how image can come at the cost of real leadership. Commodus was not a gladiator. He was a performer, using the arena as a stage to craft an illusion of strength. In doing so, he lost sight of what true leadership requires: substance, strength of character, and the ability to face the empire's challenges head-on. Commodus' life is a reminder that true power doesn't come from spectacle. It comes from genuine leadership. In today's world, where image often takes precedence over substance, his story remains more relevant than ever. Commodus may not have been the gladiator the myths make him out to be, but his life tells us something even more important. It shows us the dangers of living in a world of illusion, where the need for public approval and the desire to perform can overshadow the real work that needs to be done. As we reflect on his story, we must ask ourselves, are we more focused on the image we project than on the actions that define us? Commodus' name is often synonymous with gladiatorial combat, the image of a brutal emperor fighting in the arena. But how much of this is truth? You've probably heard the legend that Commodus fought gladiators, but is it all fact, or is this just another myth? In this video, we will uncover the truth about one of Rome's most notorious emperors and explore what his obsession with gladiators reveals about power, leadership, and public perception. Commodus didn't just rule, he wanted to perform. When he became emperor, he was young and eager to prove himself. Unlike other Roman emperors who sought to consolidate power through wisdom and governance, Commodus sought to build his image through public spectacle. In his mind, being a gladiator was not only a demonstration of strength, but a way to connect with the people. The idea that he faced real gladiators in combat, though, is more fiction than fact. At first glance, the idea of an emperor fighting in the arena seems like a fitting display of strength, but the reality is that Commodus' fights were staged events, orchestrated carefully to ensure that he emerged victorious every time. The emperor wasn't fighting for his life, he was fighting for his image. His portrayal as a gladiator, though, served a purpose far beyond mere entertainment. Commodus was crafting a myth, a public persona, and this persona became central to his reign. This obsession with performance isn't unique to ancient Rome. Leaders have always sought ways to control their image, and Commodus was no different. Gladiators were seen as warriors, symbols of strength and resilience, and by portraying himself as one, Commodus tapped into these very symbols. His battles in the arena weren't just about spectacle. They were a political maneuver to solidify his image and gain favor with the masses. But the deeper question remains, did this obsession with public spectacle help or harm his leadership? The short answer is that Commodus' obsession with the arena contributed to the slow unraveling of his reign. By focusing on public performances, he neglected the serious political responsibilities of ruling the empire. His gladiatorial antics took center stage while the governance of Rome suffered. The more time he spent in the arena, the less time he spent addressing the empire's actual problems. His lack of attention to political matters alienated the Roman elite, and his reckless behavior began to foster instability. But it wasn't just Commodus' neglect of governance that led to his downfall. Ancient Roman rulers relied on public perception to maintain their power, and Commodus was no different. The more he performed as a gladiator, the more he built an image of invincibility. This, however, started to create tension among the political and military elite. Commodus' need for public approval created a dangerous divide between his public persona and the reality of his rule. In many ways, Commodus' use of the arena to gain favor with the people wasn't unlike modern political spectacle. Today, we see leaders using media to build an image, much like Commodus used gladiatorial combat. The danger, however, is when the performance takes priority over real action. Commodus' focus on spectacle over substance eventually led to a weakening of Rome's political structure. His reign, marked by extravagant performances, distracted from the true issues facing the empire, leading to its gradual decline. Now it's time to confront the uncomfortable truth. Commodus wasn't just distracting Rome with his gladiator persona, he was also undermining the legacy of his family. The Antonine dynasty, once seen as one of the strongest ruling families of Rome, began to unravel under Commodus' reign. His obsession with his gladiatorial performances and his reckless approach to leadership tarnished the legacy of his predecessors, especially his father, Marcus Aurelius. The comparison between father and son highlights the vast contrast in leadership styles. Marcus Aurelius was known for his wisdom, stoicism, and commitment to duty, while Commodus was more interested in his image than in the future of Rome. This shift in leadership ultimately led to the decline of the Antonine dynasty. In ancient Rome, propaganda was a key tool for rulers. Commodus was a master of this, carefully crafting an image of himself as a gladiator. Coins, statues, and performances were all used to promote his persona. By creating this larger-than-life image, Commodus reinforced his power and control over the people. But as we look at his reign, it's clear that this propaganda was a double-edged sword. While it secured his popularity with the masses, it also exposed the emptiness of his leadership. The question then becomes, could modern politics learn something from Commodus' use of propaganda? Commodus' need to control his image was driven by his desire for power. He understood that power isn't just about ruling, it's about perception. By presenting himself as a gladiator, Commodus was able to control how the people saw him: powerful, fearless, and invincible. But what does this reveal about the nature of power? Is it really about strength and dominance, or is it about the ability to manipulate perceptions and shape public public opinions. In popular culture, the story of Commodus has been retold in films like Gladiator, where he is portrayed as the villain, the emperor who killed his father and wanted to rule the arena. The movie presents a dramatic version of Commodus, emphasizing his obsession with gladiators and power. But how accurate is this portrayal? While Commodus did have a fascination with the arena, the film takes liberties with his story to create a more dramatic narrative. This raises an important question. How does popular culture shape our understanding of historical figures? And how much of what we know about Commodus is shaped by these portrayals? The final days of Commodus' reign were marked by chaos. His obsession with gladiators and public spectacle alienated those around him. He made enemies in the Senate and among the military elite, both of whom were crucial to maintaining the empire's stability. His focus on the arena was just one part of his larger decline, but it played a significant role in his eventual assassination. Commodus' death marked the end of his gladiatorial obsession and the beginning of a new chapter in Roman history. Commodus' life is a cautionary tale. It's a story about the dangers of prioritizing personal glory over duty. By focusing on his image and public spectacle, he neglected the real work of leadership. His obsession with his gladiator persona didn't make him a stronger ruler, it weakened him. In the end, Commodus may have been a famous emperor, but he was far from a great one. His story serves as a reminder that true power doesn't come from image, it comes from substance and leadership. Commodus may have been known as a gladiator in the arena, but his true legacy is much more complex. His story shows the dangers of living in a world of illusion, where appearance takes precedence over action. The truth behind his gladiatorial exploits reveals a ruler who failed to understand the difference between performance and leadership. Today, his story is more relevant than ever. In a world driven by media and image, we must ask ourselves, are we focusing too much on performance and not enough on real action? Commodus, the emperor often depicted as a gladiator in the arena, has been the subject of many stories, but how much of what we think we know is true? You've probably heard the legendary tale of Commodus fighting gladiators, but was he really the warrior he claimed to be? In this video, we're going to dive deep into the surprising truth behind this emperor's gladiatorial exploits and what his actions reveal about power, leadership, and the manipulation of public perception. When Commodus became emperor at a young age, he craved the spotlight. It's not uncommon for rulers to seek recognition, but Commodus took it to a whole new level. Not content to rule from the throne, he wanted to prove his strength and establish his power on the grand stage of the arena. But here's where it gets interesting. These fights were staged, and many of these exaggerated tales were more about crafting an image than any real combat. So did Commodus truly fight, or is it just another myth? The reality is a bit more complicated. In ancient Rome, spectacle played a vital role in leadership. Emperors relied heavily on public approval, and Commodus was no different. But while many rulers focused on governance and military victories, Commodus found a unique way to win the people over. By portraying himself as a gladiator, it was a theatrical and almost mythical approach. He saw himself as the modern-day Hercules, not just an emperor, but a godlike figure who could face the most feared warriors in the world. His public fights weren't just about proving strength, they were performances. But what does this tell us about his true nature? Did Commodus actually need to perform to be respected, or was it simply about controlling his image? Now let's talk about gladiators themselves. Most people think gladiatorial combat was simply a brutal free-for-all. While these battles were undoubtedly fierce, they were also deeply ritualized and organized. Gladiators were highly trained professionals, often bound by contracts to fight in these bloody contests. For the emperor, participation in the arena wasn't about physical combat. Their role was ceremonial, to oversee the events, be part of the show. Gladiators fought for fame, often in highly staged bouts designed to keep the crowd entertained. But how did Commodus fit into this tradition? His desire to fight wasn't about honor, it was about spectacle and control. Commodus wasn't just participating, he was the show. As we dig deeper, the idea that Commodus actually fought real gladiators becomes even murkier. In reality, his fights were often carefully orchestrated performances with opponents who posed little threat. Commodus' victory was all but guaranteed. The outcome of these staged events was meticulously controlled. The gladiators were either not skilled enough to defeat him, or the fights were so choreographed that they couldn't possibly result in harm to the emperor. What's even more fascinating is that these staged performances weren't just for entertainment, they served a political purpose. Commodus was constructing a narrative, an image of invincibility that would strengthen his rule. But what does that mean for the power of perception and leadership? In ancient Rome, the emperor's relationship with the public was crucial. Public opinion shaped the success of any ruler, and Commodus was acutely aware of it. He wanted to be seen as more than just an emperor. He wanted to be viewed as a warrior, a gladiator. This image was integral to maintaining his popularity among the Roman people, who thrived on grand spectacle. His staged gladiator fights helped secure his dominance in the public eye. But did it work in the long run? While he may have won the crowds with these performances, he lost the support of the elite, who were more concerned with the stability and governance of the empire. This tension between the emperor and the Roman elite was a key factor in his reign. Commodus' reign was filled with contradictions, extravagance mixed with instability. While his gladiatorial performances captured the imagination of the masses, they also marked a growing detachment from the responsibilities of leadership. His obsession with the arena and his Commodus' theatrical persona distracted him from the affairs of state. Roman writers at the time, many of whom were critical of his rule, suggested that Commodus' focus on performance over substance made him an ineffective ruler. Was he simply a weak leader hiding behind his public persona, using the arena to distract from his failures in governance? The evidence certainly suggests this. Perhaps even more striking was the contrast between Commodus and his father, Marcus Aurelius, one of Rome's most revered emperors. Marcus was known for his wisdom and stoic leadership, while Commodus was a showman, obsessed with his image. This comparison between father and son tells us a lot about the kind of leader Commodus was. Did he try to live up to his father's legacy, or did he rebel against it, embracing the world of spectacle to assert his own identity? This conflict between father and son is crucial to understanding Commodus' decisions, his actions, and ultimately, his downfall. Commodus' obsession with gladiatorial performances had serious implications for Rome's image. His public displays of strength may have garnered applause from the people, but they also undermined the traditional values that had long been associated with Roman leadership. Rome had been built on principles of duty, governance, and military prowess. By prioritizing his gladiator persona over these values, Commodus tainted the reputation of the empire. Was this focus on spectacle a significant factor in the eventual decline of Rome? While the public cheered, the Roman elite saw his actions as a betrayal of their values, setting the stage for the empire's unraveling. This is where the concept of spectacle becomes crucial to understanding how Commodus maintained power. It wasn't just about his performances in the arena. Spectacle became a tool for him to distract from his failures. By hosting grand gladiatorial games, he ensured that the people remained entertained, distracted from the political instability brewing beneath the surface. Commodus used spectacle to reinforce his control, keeping the populace entertained while ignoring the real issues facing the empire. But is this strategy all that different from modern political theater? In many ways, it mirrors the tactics used by contemporary politicians who focus more on image than on substance. When we look at the final years of Commodus' reign, it's clear that his obsession with public spectacle played a significant role in his downfall. As his reign progressed, his erratic behavior alienated the very people who had supported him. His obsession with gladiators and the arena made him a target for those around him, especially within the Senate and the military elite. The gladiatorial performances were just one part of his larger decline. Eventually, his reign ended in assassination, a tragic consequence of living in a world of illusion. What does this teach us about the dangers of focusing too much on image and not enough on substance? In the end, Commodus' story is one of overreach and the dangers of prioritizing personal glory over the responsibilities of leadership. His focus on spectacle, his obsession with his image, and his disregard for the true work of ruling led to his downfall. His life offers a cautionary tale, reminding us that the most effective leaders are those who understand the difference between performance and real power. Commodus may have been an emperor, but he wasn't a great leader, and today his life still offers important lessons for how power is wielded and perceived. Commodus, one of the most infamous emperors of Rome, is often remembered for one legendary claim, that he fought in the gladiatorial arena. But what if I told you that what we know about his so-called battles might not be what it seems? Get ready for a deep dive into the world of Commodus, the emperor who blurred the lines between power, performance, and politics. What you're about to learn may challenge everything you thought you knew about him. You've probably heard of the extravagant tales of Commodus fighting gladiators, but there's a darker truth hiding behind these stories. Most people think of him as the ruthless emperor who fought to the death in the Coliseum, earning the adoration of the Roman public. But what if that's more of a myth than reality? Let's start by diving into how this story began and why it became so deeply ingrained in history. Commodus was young when he ascended to the throne, and like many who crave power, he sought the spotlight. Rather than ruling behind closed doors, he chose to step into the arena and present himself as a larger-than-life figure. His battles were not about defending the empire. They were about projecting strength and reinforcing his reign. But did he actually fight real gladiators? The truth is, many of his so-called gladiatorial matches were staged. Commodus was more showman than warrior. His fights were carefully controlled, often with opponents who couldn't harm him. But why did people believe these stories? In ancient Rome, public perception was everything. Emperors knew that to maintain power, they had to win over the people. Commodus took this to the extreme. He staged these fights to create an image of invincibility. Public spectacles were meant to keep the masses entertained and distracted, while the emperor solidified his rule. But here's the twist. His thirst for fame came at a cost. Was his obsession with the arena a clever way to secure control, or was it a sign of his growing instability? Gladiators were not mere fighters, they were professionals. These combatants trained for years, mastering combat techniques and facing brutal conditions. While Commodus performed in the arena, his role was ceremonial, and his purpose was never to fight to the death. The gladiators fought for fame and glory, not to prove their emperor's strength. So how did Commodus fit into this deadly tradition? The key lies in his desire to control how others saw him. His gladiatorial persona was a tool, a way to manipulate public opinion and create an aura of invincibility. But was Commodus really facing these fighters head-on, or were these matches just another form of performance art? Most historians agree that Commodus's gladiator fights were far from lethal. His matches were carefully arranged, with opponents who had little chance of defeating him. These fights were part of a larger spectacle, designed to solidify his power. Commodus might have technically won, but it was all scripted, from the blows to the eventual outcome. So, did he fight real gladiators? The answer is no, not in the way we imagine. In fact, the public's belief in these staged fights points to a deeper issue: the manipulation of perception. Commodus wanted people to believe he was not just an emperor, but a gladiator, a man of physical prowess and unmatched strength. To some, this illusion made him more relatable, more charismatic. But did it work? While he won the public's affection, it alienated the elite, the very people who controlled Rome's political future. The Roman aristocracy saw Commodus as an emperor who neglected his political duties, choosing spectacle over statecraft. This tension was the foundation of his downfall. Commodus's reign was a mixture of grandeur and instability. While his gladiatorial spectacles dazzled the masses, they distracted him from the pressing issues of governance. Rather than focusing on Rome's military campaigns or political affairs, he was obsessed with his public persona. Roman historians critiqued him for his lack of leadership. Was Commodus really a powerful emperor, or just a man hiding behind an image? His focus on the arena seems to suggest that his leadership style was rooted in spectacle rather than substance. The contrast between Commodus and his father, Marcus Aurelius, is stark. Marcus Aurelius was known for his wisdom, humility, and stoic philosophy, qualities that made him one of Rome's most respected emperors. Commodus, on the other hand, was more focused on personal glory and public adoration. Was Commodus trying to live up to his father's legacy, or was he rejecting it entirely in favor of a different kind of power? This father-son dynamic is critical to understanding the choices Commodus made, especially his decision to turn the arena into his personal stage. The public perception of Commodus, shaped by his gladiatorial performances, had a lasting impact on Rome's image. While the common people might have cheered for their emperor, the nobility saw his actions as a betrayal of Rome's traditional values. The spectacle was undermining the serious, disciplined image that Rome had once held dear. In fact, many scholars argue that Commodus's obsession with these performances was a key factor in the eventual decline of the empire. What was once a symbol of Roman strength was now reduced to a theater of distraction, with Rome's stability crumbling beneath the surface. In ancient politics, spectacle played a huge role in maintaining power. Commodus understood this better than anyone. By hosting these grand games, he ensured his popularity with the people. But the spectacle also served a deeper purpose, distracting the masses from the real problems within the empire. His gladiatorial performances were more about manipulating the audience than actual combat. In many ways, his reliance on performance echoes modern-day political theater. Do politicians today use spectacle to distract from more serious issues? As Commodus's reign progressed, his obsession with the arena became more extreme, leading to a decline in his political influence. His erratic behavior alienated both his political allies and military commanders. His gladiatorial performances may have been a small part of the larger picture, but they symbolized his deeper disconnection from the empire's actual needs. Eventually, Commodus's erratic actions led to his assassination. His focus on gladiatorial combat, while initially helping his reign, ultimately contributed to his downfall. What can we learn from this tragic end? It's a reminder that living in a world of illusion, where spectacle takes precedence over reality, can lead to destruction. Commodus's life is a cautionary tale. His obsession with glory, public performance, and power ultimately led him to neglect his responsibilities as an emperor. Instead of focusing on the welfare of Rome, he pursued personal fame. The lessons from his reign are clear. Prioritizing spectacle over substance can ruin even the most powerful leaders. Commodus may have been emperor, but his life is a stark reminder that true leadership requires more than just the performance of power. How much of modern leadership today is shaped by image, and how much is truly about substance? By now, you can see that the legend of Commodus as a gladiator is much more myth than fact. His fights were staged performances, designed to build an image of invincibility. But despite the carefully constructed public persona, the truth is much more complex. Commodus was more interested in shaping his image than ruling effectively. And in the end, this illusion of power led to his downfall. So, how does this change your perception of Commodus? The emperor who fought in the arena might not have been the warrior he appeared to be, but he certainly understood the power of perception. What does the life of an emperor who allegedly fought in the arena tell us? Commodus, one of the most infamous rulers of ancient Rome, is often remembered for stepping into the gladiatorial arena, battling to prove his strength and invincibility. But the truth may shock you. What if the stories of Commodus as a gladiator are not as real as we've been led to believe? Stay tuned as we dive into the myth and the reality behind the emperor's note. Most people think of Commodus as a ruthless emperor who fought alongside gladiators, slaying enemies in the arena. But what if this is more fiction than fact? Let's separate myth from reality and uncover the truth behind his so-called gladiatorial career. In this video, we'll take you on a journey through his reign, examining how his desire for power, public perception, and strategic manipulations influenced both his rule and his legacy. So, did Commodus really fight in the Coliseum, or was it all an illusion? Commodus' rise to power was as dramatic as it was swift. Becoming emperor at a young age, he found himself in a position where public perception was critical. Like many who crave the spotlight, Commodus loved attention. He craved validation validation, both from his people and from history itself. It was not enough to simply rule. He needed to be seen as a larger-than-life figure, someone worthy of being compared to the mighty Hercules. Thus, he began publicizing his gladiatorial exploits, leading to stories that Commodus fought real gladiators in epic contests of strength. But were these tales of death matches truly real, or was something more sinister at play? The truth is, much of what we know about Commodus fighting in the arena is exaggerated, and in many cases, completely fabricated. Commodus wanted to be viewed not only as the Emperor of Rome, but as a gladiator in his own right, someone who could face off against trained warriors and emerge victorious. However, the fights he staged were far from dangerous. Most historians agree that Commodus's matches were carefully arranged to ensure his victory. It wasn't about real combat, it was about performance, about creating an image of invincibility. His battles were in fact staged spectacles, designed to manipulate the public's perception of him. Now, why did people believe these staged battles? The answer lies in the power of spectacle. In ancient Rome, emperors like Commodus understood that their rule was dependent on public opinion. Rome was a city of spectacle. Grand games, lavish parades, and public displays of power were the tools of emperors who wanted to cement their status. Commodus, like many before him, relied on these distractions to maintain control over the people. He wanted the Romans to believe that he was not just an emperor, but also a warrior, someone who was willing to fight in the arena to prove his worth. The question, however, remains, why did he feel the need to put on such a display? The answer lies in his desire for control. Commodus knew that public perception was everything, and in his mind, appearing as a gladiator would make him appear stronger and more powerful than ever. He was not interested in the brutal nature of the gladiatorial fights, but rather in the public adoration they would bring him. It wasn't about the fight itself. It was about dominating the minds of his people, about creating an illusion of strength. But here's where it gets more interesting. While Commodus was busy shaping his image as a mighty gladiator, he was simultaneously neglecting the very duties that an emperor should uphold. Political instability began to grow within Rome, and his focus on the arena distracted him from the important matters of governance. His reign, though marked by extravagant public displays, was also one of increasing instability. Commodus' obsession with public shows of strength took priority over Rome's actual needs, military campaigns, diplomacy, and leadership. Now let's examine what this all means in terms of leadership. Commodus' obsession with gladiatorial spectacles ultimately points to a deeper issue: his inability to lead effectively. Where his father, Marcus Aurelius, had been a wise and respected leader, Commodus was more interested in personal glory. The relationship between father and son is crucial here. Marcus Aurelius, known for his stoic wisdom and disciplined rule, set a high bar for leadership. Commodus, instead of following in his father's footsteps, sought to carve his own path, one based not on wisdom or duty but on performance and fame. He wanted to be remembered as a hero, not a philosopher. Between father and son offers vital insight into the choices Commodus made. Was he trying to live up to his father's legacy, or was he rejecting it entirely? Some argue that Commodus, in his quest for personal glory, was rebelling against his father's legacy of serious, principled rule, and in doing so, he may have sealed his own fate. So how did Commodus' gladiatorial performances affect Rome's image? While the common people cheered for their emperor in the arena, the nobility grew disillusioned. His behavior was seen as a betrayal of Rome's traditional values, which prize duty, honor, and leadership above all else. The public might have been entertained by his gladiatorial performances, but to the elite, these spectacles were a symbol of Rome's decline. The once great empire was now distracted by a ruler obsessed with his public persona. This obsession with spectacle was not just a form of entertainment, it became a political tool. By hosting grand gladiatorial games and other public spectacles, Commodus ensured that the people were entertained and distracted from the more pressing issues of governance. This reliance on spectacle is eerily similar to modern-day political theater, where the focus often shifts from substantive issues to creating an image of strength and power. Could we be seeing echoes of Commodus's rule today, where appearance often takes precedence over action? As Commodus' reign wore on, his behavior grew more erratic. His focus on his gladiatorial persona, which had once served to solidify his image as a powerful emperor, began to backfire. The political elite grew frustrated with his disregard for Rome's needs, and his reckless behavior caused tension among the military and senate. His gladiatorial performances, while captivating to the public, were only a small part of a much larger decline. The ultimate consequence of this distraction from leadership was Commodus' assassination, which marked the end of his reign. Commodus' life and reign offer a crucial lesson. His obsession with public spectacle and the creation of a powerful image ultimately led to his downfall. His focus on entertainment rather than governance showed the dangers of prioritizing personal glory over true leadership. Commodus may have been an emperor, but his reign is a stark reminder that true power comes not from public appearances but from genuine leadership and responsibility. Today, we can learn from Commodus' mistakes and recognize that leadership based on spectacle rather than substance is bound to collapse. So what can we learn from Commodus? His story is a timeless warning about the dangers of prioritizing image over substance. He may have been able to fool the public with his gladiatorial performances, but in the end, it was his inability to lead that led to his downfall. Commodus' life teaches us that true leadership requires requires more than just a public persona. It requires real strength, wisdom, and responsibility. What do you think about the way power is wielded today? Do we still see echoes of Commodus rule in the way leaders shape their images? If you enjoyed this epic journey, please subscribe to our channel for more thrilling historical tales. Don't miss out on new videos. Hit the notification bell to stay updated.